Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to be getting into SuiteAnalytics, and specifically, we're going to start with datasets, which are really the building blocks for SuiteAnalytics. So let's take a look at this. So we're here on our home page, and we're going to come up to the Analytics tab and click on that. And it's going to bring us to this page. Now, we don't really need to take a look at this. Really, I'm going to have you look over here. You can see we have workbooks and datasets. Now, datasets, I mentioned just before that datasets are the building blocks. So an analogy is that you could think of datasets like wood, the raw material, and workbooks are the visual representation of the dataset. So if dataset is the wood, a workbook would be the carving. After you've done all this work for it or work with it, it's going to be that representation that you have in the end. So let's take a look at datasets. And when we click on this, first off, down here, we're taking a look at all the data sets that currently exist. So as along with this NetSuite edition, it came with a number of existing data sets, and we'll really take a look at that later. But for now, we want to create a new data set. So we're going to go over here and click New Data Set. So what we're looking at here is it's going to ask us basically what type of data set are we trying to make. Now, the key thing to keep in mind as we go through this is that a data set is just like a saved search. And I'll show you exactly how that is. But if you remember, when we're starting a new search, the first thing it asks us to do is specify what type of search. And we generally select a transaction because that's the most common type of search. So same thing, we're trying to make a new data set. It's saying what kind of data set. So we can go down to the T's and we can select a transaction. We can also use this search bar to easily just sift it down to transaction. And we'll click on that. So we've now specified that we want a transaction typed data set. So it's going to load, and then it's going to bring up the data set itself. Now, I think this is the point where a lot of people just give up on SuiteAnalytics because at this early point, you haven't even really specified what you want other than the fact that it's a transaction data set. And suddenly you have this page filled with various information. There's not a lot of fields that tell you exactly what you're looking at. So it can be a little overwhelming at first. But again, just keep in mind, it's just like a saved search. So I'm going to break this down piece by piece. And I actually have up here an example of, just to show how they compare. This is just a generic saved transaction search. And if we come down here, you should recognize this page, right? We have criteria. And when you create a new transaction search, there's no criteria set, right? So there's nothing down here. If we come back over to our data set, this bar here, right here, this field, not everything below it, but just this blue field here where it says drop fields here to add criteria. This is our criteria area. This is our little criteria subtab, and it starts blank. There's nothing set as a criteria yet. So everything that it's pulling up and showing you is actually just every single transaction. It's basically dumping everything on you at once. So again, let's go back to our saved search. So criteria is empty, but if we go to results and we scroll down, notice we start with all these fields. So the transaction search assumes that you want certain fields and it just dumps them on you. So take a look, we got things like date, we've got document number, type, name, account, amount. So now let's come over to our data set. This little window here, and not everything, but just all the blue ones, right? From date down to type, those are our results. And I'm actually going to click on this little button here. And I'll explain what that does in a second, but you can tell that this just makes it a little cleaner. It just empties out all of this. So if you just focus here, all of these blue things, and you'll see the same types of fields: date, document number, entity, which is customer, its name, that is an equivalent tag, memo, amount, type. So we have the very, very similar results that it's just defaulting and assuming that those are the things that we want with no criteria set. So if we take a look at this, with results over here and criteria here, this last window is the preview window. So if we go back to Save Transaction Search and we come down and we do a preview, so what we're seeing here in this column with date, type, name, all of these things from our results, if we go to our data set, we're seeing the preview here. We simply see it in the same window. They're grouping everything together, which if you're used to that, it's actually more convenient. You don't have to constantly go back and forth. You can instantly see the result of what you're selecting between the criteria and the various results will appear here automatically as you start manipulating things. So with that in mind, now that you have a concept of how it's relating to a saved search, now just think about what you would do if you were making a saved search. So let's say in this scenario, just like we've done in previous saved search videos, let's say we're trying to do a search that's very simple. We just want mainline to be true. We want to look for invoices, and we want to have some basic things selected, some common things like amount, date, customer name. We want those selected as results. So the first thing we would do is we would specify the criteria. So right now we don't have any criteria selected, so we really need two. We need type and we need mainline. So type, notice if we come over here, so these are the results. And then if we look down here, these are all the various fields that we can grab for criteria or for results as needed. So if we come down, if you take a look at these, you'll notice just like when we're over here, if we come back to return to criteria, if I come to this window, I have this long drop down. That's basically what we're seeing here is we've got all these items. So for example, if I go down, we've got common things like status. I could set status as a criteria. I've got terms. However, notice I don't have type. I've got this type-based documentation, but that's not the same thing. So where do I get type? Well, I actually have to go back up here. And once something is selected here, so out of all of these blues, now that I have type up here in the results, it basically takes it out from the bottom. So it's no longer available down there. Now I have, and you'll see I have type, if I move over a bit here, I have type in my results here, and you can preview it here. So if I want to add that to the criteria, I can do it two ways. I can either grab type and drag it up from here, and it won't actually remove it from the results. It'll simply make a copy of it up there. Or I could go here and I can grab type and I can move it over here. And you'll see it doesn't let you grab it in, it doesn't let you drop it in here because I already have it added to my results, but I can add it here to the criteria. And when I do that, it pulls up an almost identical window to when you're doing a saved search. It simply says, what are you trying to add? So we're trying to add, we can go up here and click invoice. And we can double click on this and it simply adds it to what we're doing. We can select multiple as needed. And then we have the ability up here to do any of or none of. So any of is fine. And we're gonna hit apply. So we've now added that criteria. So as soon as we do that, notice this just repopulated. So it's no longer pulling up all different types of transactions. Now it's simply filtered to the criteria of invoices. So the second thing we wanted to add was mainline. Now, mainline you actually won't find here. Now this is where we get into what I consider probably one of the more difficult concepts to grasp with SuiteAnalytics, is this concept of this panel over here, which is actually showing you tables. So it's important to understand, to really grasp this and how this is working, it's important to understand that NetSuite is a relational database. So it has a bunch of different tables that are all linked to each other. And certain fields in certain tables will join to other fields and interact with them in those ways. And a bunch of those tables all together compose that database. So what you're seeing here right now, this blue field that's highlighted, transaction, this is actually a table. And within that table, it has all these different fields. So just like memo is a field, or you could call it a column, all of these different things are these various columns that are available in the transaction database. And the blue ones at the top here are simply the ones that we've selected to be results. And of course, the ones that you see over here are the ones that are selected to be criteria. So we can look through and we see all of these different fields that relate to the transaction table. Now, I had selected this little button here, so I'm going to unselect this. And just to clarify why we're seeing this one and why we have this radio switch here is the fact that we're looking at a transaction data set. So automatically, it's defaulting to have transaction be the primary table that we're looking at. So that's going to be at the top there, and you'll see all the results from that one here. But if we click that radio button, now we can see all of the available tables. And you'll even see these little drill down buttons, which as you click on them, it'll show not just, for example, here we have transaction line, so that's a table. And then by doing drill downs, we can actually do joins to other tables. And if you don't have a complete understanding of what that means, I will be making a relational database video to really kind of go into depth of how that works. But the simplicity is you've got tables on the left and you've got fields on the right. So you are going to be selecting from the fields, but you need to clarify sometimes what table is the field that you're looking for. So for example, we're looking for mainline. Now, the difference, you have transaction here and you have transaction line just below it. The transaction one probably should be it would be a little clearer if it said transaction header. And there's basically a table that's all the header level information for a transaction. So in this case, if we're talking about an invoice, a document number for that invoice, that would be header level information. In other words, the invoice only has one document number for that invoice, as opposed to the line level information, which could be the various items, the quantities. You could have different locations and classes all in the line level. So that table for line level is, for transactions specifically, is included here. So if we click on that, and the reason I'm getting into this is because mainline is not in transaction. If we went down that list in the transaction table, down here, you would not find mainline. It's just not stored there. It's actually in transaction line. And so if you go down here, we'll go to main, and you'll see mainline right here. So we're gonna drag that up to our criteria. We'll drop that in, and we said we're gonna specify it as invoices mainline is true. So we'll hit apply. And again, you'll see, you might have noticed down there, it automatically updated our fields below to be just mainline is true for invoices. So we now have that selected in as the criteria. And let's actually also add location. Let's say in my data set, I want to have location as one of the results. So I've now added that in there. It immediately populates. And notice by doing that, it actually adds, notice we have location now up here and it's blue. And you'll also see over here on the left, we've got this 1 bubble, and then transaction has this 7 bubble. So those bubbles and those blue, that's indicating what are the results that is included in this SuiteAnalytics data set. So when I added mainline, that didn't do anything because that's only for the criteria. These blue fields up here, and again, if I go to transaction, you can see all these blue fields, those are the results. So if you look down and you have several bubbles saying 1, 2, etc., you'll see where you have your various results in this data set. An additional thing you can do, just like with saved searches, you can do a search. So for example, if I wanted to add currency, I can type currency in. Now it basically pulls up, and the way to look at this is, again, you have the table on the left and the exact field on the right. So transaction, within the transaction table, you have all these different fields. And this might be a little hard to look at first, but you kind of get the hang of it. You'll usually want to get the simplest thing, and it'll be pretty easy to spot. So if we're looking for currency, we probably just want this one that says currency, not all of these ones that are actually amount paid, and they just have currency is somewhere in that join. We don't want that, again, unless you specifically do want a join field that is going through those hoops, you would just grab currency and you can drag that in. So now we have currency listed here. It's US dollar. If we go down, you'll see we have a few other currencies there. So that's how the search bar works. Now, I commented in the reports video that the search bar is not helpful for reports. It's better to just drill down. In this instance, when it comes to SuiteAnalytics, I highly recommend you do use that search bar unless you're very familiar with the concept of joins and related fields. It's best to just stick with the search bar, know, okay, this is the field that I want, type that in, find the instance where it's most clearly stated and it's most logical, and just add that to your workbook, or in this case, the data set. So those are the basics. Again, you'll see there's just so much similarity between what we've just done and what you would have in a saved search. You have your results, you have your criteria, you can have a little preview of it. And then there's a bunch of other features, which I'm not going to go in depth on, but I'm just going to touch on it. For example, you have like reset criteria. If you just want to wipe out the existing criteria and make whatever you want, you have that option. You also have these buttons down here, these little dots that allow you to make changes in formatting to the various columns. For example, let's say we've got, if I come over here, I've got entity, and pull that over more. So let's say entity. I don't want it to say entity, I want it to say customer. So I can actually go to rename, and it'll allow me to just type in whatever I want to change it to, and then it changes that label right there. You also have a number of other sorting, formatting, etc. that you have options there. Over here, you have the option with this little button to push that kind of field selector out of the way, and it'll give you more freedom and more availability screen-wise to set and look at your preview and to set your criteria. If we pop that back, you have the refresh button up here. Now, datasets automatically refresh as you start moving things around, so it's not as important here, but when you get to workbooks, it's very important to hit refresh as often as you change things because it won't automatically refresh and you might get confused while you're looking at something old. You also have these buttons here. This is to undo, so if you make a little mistake or you go down a certain rabbit hole and then you find it's messed up your information, you can always just hit that undo button to get back to the point that you felt comfortable. And I do want to comment that notice up here, you can click on formulas. I made a saved search video showing how you can add formulas to your saved searches. If you click on that formulas thing, it'll give you the exact same feature. In fact, the user interface for it is a little bit cleaner even. And again, if you have the basics of formulas and know how to add those, you can simply click that feature and add whatever formulas you want. Lastly, I'm just going to touch on these points, which is export. You can export this data set as a CSV or an Excel file. You can also, this share function is just like, if we go to Save Search, we have this Audiences subtab. It does the exact same thing. It's specifying who can look at this data set or even operate with it. So you have that option to click on Share. It's pretty straightforward of how to use it. And lastly, of course, once you've got the data set how you want it, which we're comfortable with this one, we're going to hit Save. It now asks us, just like when you're making Save Search, what do you want to call this data set? So for the sake of this, we'll just say Test 1. And you should probably add a description that would be available so that if anyone else comes across that data set, especially if you're sharing it with others, that's very clear what this data set is showing and what its use is. So we'll just put a little description in there and hit Save. All right, and it gives us this little pop-up showing that our data set has been saved. And if we go back to Analytics, and we're on the Datasets tab as opposed to Workbooks, if we scroll down, you'll see right here, Transaction Dataset Test 1. So this is the dataset we just created. So it's easily accessible after that. And if you want to make changes to it, you can simply hit that Edit button. And that's it for datasets in SuiteAnalytics. In the next video, we're going to use that dataset to make a pivot table. So I'll see you in the next video.